Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the sequelize ORM. My name is Kyle, and in this video we're going to talk about how to connect to a database. So first off, we're going to actually need a database. That's kind of a prerequisite to this. And for this, I'm going to use XAMPP to install a database. That's pretty much all I'm going to use XAMPP for, but I'm going to use it to install a database. So let's go back here real quick. I kind of skipped forward there, sorry. Google XAMPP or MAMP or WAMP. There's actually a lot of these out there. Or if you want, just install a MySQL database on its own, or if you have a remote database you can attach to, that's even better. So we're going to install this. I would actually prefer that you use a remote database, but I realized that remote databases always cost money. That's just like a thing. They cost money. So I'm going to show you how to connect to a local database and kind of trust that you know how to connect to a remote database if you have one available to you, because it's the exact same thing, almost. So while that's downloading, I also want to download MySQL Workbench. And this is because I don't use phpMyAdmin. If you're familiar with XAMPP, then you know what that is. It's kind of the MySQL database dashboard that comes with XAMPP, but I want to use MySQL Workbench. And I had all of these things downloaded, but my computer decided to stop working for me, so I had to reset the whole thing like a month ago, and I have absolutely none of this downloaded now. Let's see here. So I have to re-download a lot of stuff. That's always fun. All right. So while this is all downloading, because it's going to take a second to actually do anything, let's go into here. And I want you to create a directory inside of your main directory. And we're going to call this config. And I know you're probably saying, wait, you told us to delete a config directory a couple videos back. I did, mainly because I just wanted you to delete the file that was inside of it, which was called config.json, because we're actually going to add a new file to this. So let's create a file inside of our config file called config, and it needs to be a JavaScript file, not a JSON file. I don't really like that sequelize recommends using a JSON file because I find it very limiting. JavaScript allows you to do actual logic inside of this file, whereas JSON kind of doesn't. Well, actually, yeah, JSON completely doesn't. You cannot do logic inside of a JSON file. So now I'm going through actually installing XAMPP. Okay. And then let's also go back because we should be able to run MySQL Workbench now. And really just click through all of these. Okay. And now in config.js, we're going to do a couple other things, but there's one more file that I need you to create. So in our top level directory, and this is important, this needs to be in your top level directory of this project, we're going to not do it this way. I'm going to use git bash to do this because it's one of those files that starts with a period, and some editors are really, they don't like you doing that. So we're going to say touch.env. All right, so that creates a new file for us in here called env. Finish that. And it doesn't really know what to do with this file, but we're going to open it. And I'm going to open it as a text file, unless there's an option for an env file. Nope. Okay, so now that that's installed and everything, we're good to go. But basically, what is an env file? An env file is usually where you keep all of your more sensitive information. Okay, it's going to take a second. So anytime you have strings that you don't want anyone else to know, this is where you would put them. And it's not just going to be for database stuff. I use env files for all types of things. If you're logging into, so if you have S3 secrets, or if you have, what's other things? Different environment variables. I can only think of that one right now. But there are a lot of different things you want to keep secret. So obviously we want to go into .gitignore and we want to tell it, hey, do not care about env files. Those are things that you can just go ahead and ignore. All right, so we're going to put one couple lines in here, and it's going to be username, password, database, host, and finally, let's see here, username, password, database, host. Pretty sure that's it, actually. Let's go ahead and look at... Oh, no, node env. There we go. I was like, what is it? I know there's a fifth one. Node env. Quick note, these do not need to be in all caps. That's kind of just a thing that I do with my env things, is I put them in all caps. They don't need to be in all caps. But they are definitely constants. They do not change. They don't have the ability to change. All right, how's XAMPP doing? XAMPP is getting there. Okay. So now in config.js, we're going to need a specific package. .env. Okay. So this is a very popular package, as you can see. So env files, very popular. Let's go ahead and install .env. So we'll say npm i-save and .env. So we'll let that install. How are you doing? Still taking your time. And in here, we're going to write, let's see here, it's just require. We don't even actually have to say anything. So, .env. Okay, I believe that we don't have to say anything. Let's look at the actual documentation. Require, .config. Okay, there we go. Require.env.config. So what this is going to do is it's going to look for our env file. And that's why I said this has to be in your top level. Otherwise, this can get confused. But it's going to look for this file, and it's going to take all of these variables that you set and put them as actual environment variables. So, for example, in your ww folder, you have this right here, and I got rid of it. But it's saying, let's see here, is there another example. There's not. Okay, well, port is actually something that you can have as an environment variable. Environment variables are just variables that your computer sets. And that actually reminds me, while we're looking at this, do not use username. I apologize for that. If you might be able to guess why you shouldn't use username. Your computer actually has already set a username variable, and it's probably the username that you use on your account to log into the computer. So I usually just do name. Because yeah, if you do username here, it's just going to be overwritten by whatever your computer has already set. Because like I said, environment variables, they do not change. All right, are you done? You're almost done. All right, so it finally finished. Once it is finished, let's get control panel up and running. Oh, more stuff to do. No. Okay. And so we want to open up this MySQL and just click start right here. And once you click start, you can really just ignore everything, give it access, because you actually do need to give it access. And we're good to go there. So in name, oh, there is actually one other thing we need to do. I apologize. I'm sorry. So click start on Apache, because before we can actually no, we can do this with we can do this with MySQL Workbench. So you're good. So under name, let's actually go into MySQL Workbench and connect to this, and then we can give this thing a name. So first, I'm going to just call this connection name local. We're connecting standard TCP IP. Your local host name should be 127.0.0.1 or connect to whatever remote database you're using. 3306 is the standard connection port, but if this says something other than 3306, then that is the port you need to connect to. Root is the standard, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Default username given to this database, and it won't have a password, so you can just click test connection. It is going to warn you. It's basically telling you this is not a secure connection. Why are you trying to connect to this? Stop at all costs. It's your local connection. You know it's safe. You know that SSL is okay not to be there. If you're connecting to a remote database and you see a warning like that, that might actually be a chance for you to say, should I be connecting to this database? Or have I maybe set up this database incorrectly? But locally, you're okay to see that warning. Okay. And we'll click OK because we know this is real. So now let's click into this local, and we're going to create a new schema. So over here, we're going to click into schemas. So it'll open up with administrative, and we don't really care about administration. We want schemas. And then we're going to click this little thing up here that looks like a new database. And for this, I'm going to call this literally my own tutor and click OK or apply. And then it'll come up with this. It'll show us the actual code that it's going to run and click finish. Over here, we now see that we have a new database called my own tutor, but it doesn't have any tables in it. And that makes us sad. So we will delete this because we don't want to accidentally do that again. And we don't need to see that. So let's move this all the way over there. Actually, let's just get rid of it entirely. Panels, hide, sidebar? No. Let's try this. Okay. So in your editor, we're going to call the name of this database is my own tutor. And while this doesn't technically need to be wrapped in quotation marks like this, it could actually be written like this. I prefer to put it in quotation marks, or apostrophe single quotation marks. My name, as we just said, is root, or username. Remember that name means username. Password, there is no password. And this is why I like using the single quotation marks, because otherwise it would just look like this and it looks empty. Host is localhost, or you can write 127.0.0.1, or whatever the remote database host is. And then for Nodejs, we're going to write dev. And I'll talk about what this is in a second. But we can go ahead and click Save. And now in config.js, we're going to do a little bit of, what's the word I'd like to do? I don't know. We're going to do a little bit of configuration. So first, we're going to create a constant, and we'll call it config. And it's going to be equal to an object. Okay? And then, as you can imagine, this object is going to have different objects inside of it. So first we're going to have dev, and that's going to be an object. And then we're going to have test, and that's going to be an object. And then we might have production or prod, and that's an object. Okay? And finally, module.exports equals, can you guess what it is? It's config. And then inside here, we're going to write node env. And I know this doesn't exist yet, but we'll see where it's coming from in a second. So we're only going to export one of these things. We're not going to export this. And there's a specific reason why we do that. So first, let's go back into Chrome and look at .env. And we see right here how we can actually now pull these different things off of our process environment variables. So let's create those in here. We'll say const username equals process.env.name. Okay. Next, we will say const password equals process.env.password. Then we'll say const database equals process.env.database. Const host equals process.env.host. And finally, const node env equals process.env.nodeenv. All right. And again, if this doesn't make sense to you, just go ahead and look at the documentation for .env. It's telling you right here how to access these different processes. Kind of have to ignore this because we're not actually doing like a db.connect type situation, but you'll see where that comes into play in just a second. So now in our development, because we remember that we set Nodeenv right here to dev. So right here, this is actually going to look like this when the server runs or starts up. So we want to do this. So for here, we'll say db is equal to an object. And the reason, now you might be wondering, why on earth am I doing this? Well, because in the same way that you will likely eventually include some things in here that are not related to your database, you're almost always going to start including things in here later on that are not related to your database. So our environment configuration object or whatever that we're exporting kind of needs to tell us a little bit about what the variables it's exporting are. And to do that, I just do something like this. So we'll say db, and then we'll say username, password, database, host. And this is just ES6 destructuring, but these are all going to be equal to these. And we're exporting this object. Okay, so again, this is why I don't like that sequelize recommends that you use a JSON file to do this, because you could never do this and all of this with a JSON file. You would have to just tell getIgnore to ignore that one JSON file. And God forbid you should actually have to do some logic in here. You'd be screwed. All right, so now that we've configured all that, in the next video, we'll actually go ahead and connect to the database. I will see you there.
I'm looking for a way inside your mind. It's a haze.